The seventh battle fleet of the Kael'thari Empire hung in space like dying stars. 32 magnificent warships that had once been the pride of an interstellar civilization, now reduced to silent hulks, barely maintaining life support. Fleet Admiral Vexter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Radiant Sovereign, and felt something he'd rarely experienced in his 200 years of service: helplessness. "Status update," he commanded, though he already knew what his chief engineer would say. Sarath's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with colors that indicated frustration and defeat. "Main power is at 23% and dropping. I've rerouted everything I can to life support, but we're losing the battle. Within 4 days, we'll be on emergency batteries only. Within 7, the flagship will be uninhabitable. And the rest of the fleet. 17 ships are completely dead, crews evacuated. 14 more are in similar condition to the Sovereign. Only one ship, the Eternal Dawn, remains fully operational, and even she's showing the same cascade failures that killed the others. We estimate she has 3 weeks before she joins the graveyard." Vexter's claws dug into the command throne's armrests. "Explain to me again how this happened. How the finest fleet ever built by Kael'thari engineering is dying without firing a shot in anger." Sarath had explained this a dozen times, but she did so again with patient precision. The fleet was designed as an integrated system. Every ship's components work in perfect harmony: power distribution, environmental controls, weapons, navigation, all optimized and interconnected. When everything works, the efficiency is unmatched in the galaxy. But when something breaks, the failures cascade. One damaged component affects systems connected to it. Those systems' degraded performance affects other systems. The failures propagate through the integration pathways faster than we can isolate them. We replace damaged components, but by the time we install them, 3 other systems have failed. It's like trying to repair a ship that's sinking faster than we can bail water. And you've tried everything. Everything in the engineering manuals, everything our finest minds could devise. Admiral, the truth is that our ships were designed to work perfectly. They were never designed to be repaired when they fail catastrophically. The integrated design that makes them so efficient when functional makes them nearly impossible to fix when broken." Vexter was silent for a long moment. Then, "Send the request." Sarath's patterns shifted to surprised yellow. "Admiral, send the request to Earth. Ask for their assistance." "Sir, with respect, the humans are technological primitives. Their ships are crude compared to ours. What could they possibly do that our engineers cannot? They have a reputation, Sarath. Across the galaxy, species tell stories about humans fixing impossible problems. Making ships run that should be dead. Keeping equipment operational decades past its design life. They call it human ingenuity or stubborn refusal to accept reality. I call it our last hope. They'll send some barely qualified technician who will look at our ships and admit defeat just like we have. Then we've lost nothing. But if there's even a small chance they can help, we must take it. This fleet represents 400 years of Kael'thari engineering and enough firepower to defend 3 sectors. I will not scrap it without exhausting every option." 3 days later, a human transport docked with the Radiant Sovereign. One person disembarked. Sarath watched him walk down the boarding ramp and felt her hope, what little remained, evaporate completely. The human was old by their standards, probably mid-50s. Average height for his species, wearing coveralls that had been patched multiple times. He carried a single toolkit that looked like it had survived several wars and a battered datapad that was at least a decade old. No entourage. No advanced diagnostic equipment. No AI assistants or specialized repair drones. Just an old human with primitive tools and a tired expression. "This is what Earth sends," one of Sarath's junior engineers muttered. "One old man with a toolbox. Our fleet is dying and they send what looks like a maintenance worker." The human reached the reception area and set down his toolkit. "I'm Deacon Grey. You folks have some ships that need fixing." His voice was gravelly, accent showing Earth regional variations that Sarath's translator struggled with. He looked around at the assembled Kael'thari engineers with calm, assessing eyes. "You're the expert Earth promised us?" Sarath asked, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "I'm a mechanic, been fixing ships for 35 years. Earth said you had a fleet with cascading system failures. That's my specialty." "Your specialty is fixing Kael'thari integrated systems that our own engineers, who designed and built these ships, cannot repair." "My specialty is fixing broken things. Don't matter who built them or how fancy they are. Broken is broken. Usually there's a way to make it work again if you're willing to get creative." Admiral Vexter arrived, his command presence filling the docking bay. "You are the human engineer." "I'm Deacon Grey, sir. Just a mechanic, not an engineer, but I've fixed a lot of ships in my time. Can you save our fleet?" Deacon looked at him with those calm eyes. "Won't know until I see what we're working with. But I've never met a ship I couldn't at least get running. Might not be pretty, might not be perfect, but if you need these ships operational, I can probably make that happen." "Probably?" Sarath couldn't help the incredulous tone. "Ma'am, anyone who promises certainty before they've even looked at the problem is selling something. I promise I'll do my best. That's all I can offer until I see what's broken." Vexter studied the human for a long moment. Then something in his patterns shifted to what might have been respect. "Show him the flagship's engineering section. Let him assess the situation." Sarath led Deacon through the corridors of the Radiant Sovereign. Even dying, the ship was beautiful, elegant curves, crystalline conduits glowing with faint light, every surface designed with aesthetic and functional perfection in mind. "Your ships are impressive," Deacon said quietly. "Design is gorgeous. Must be something when they're running at full capacity." "They were the pinnacle of Kael'thari engineering," Sarath said, pain in her voice. "Took decades to design, years to build, every system optimized and integrated. Nothing in the galaxy could match them. Until they broke. Yes, they reached main engineering, the heart of the ship. Massive crystalline structures that normally pulsed with light now flickered weakly. Status displays showed red across 2/3 of the systems. The few engineers on duty moved listlessly, having exhausted every option they knew. Deacon walked slowly around the primary power distribution node, a beautiful piece of engineering, crystalline structures that routed power through quantum-entangled pathways, achieving efficiency ratings that human systems could only dream of. He studied it for several minutes, asking questions. "When did the failures start?" "6 months ago. Minor fluctuations in the power distribution. We recalibrated. The fluctuations stopped temporarily but returned worse. Then other systems began failing." "What were you doing when the failures started? Any recent modifications, updates, heavy usage?" "We just completed a training exercise. Extended combat operations simulation. Maximum power draw across all systems for 72 hours. And these crystals," Deacon pointed to the power distribution node, "they handle the primary power routing." "Yes, they're grown in zero gravity over 6 months. Quantum structures that achieve 99.7% efficiency in power distribution. They should last for decades." "Should, but this one has a fracture, right here." Deacon pointed to a nearly invisible crack in the crystal structure. "I know, we've known about that fracture for 4 months. We've tried to repair it 17 different ways. The crack is microscopic, but it's propagating through the quantum structure. Every attempt to fix it makes it worse. And because all power routes through this node, the fracture affects everything. Can you replace it? The crystals are grown at our primary shipyard, 400 light-years from here. It would take us a year to travel there in our current condition, assuming we can even maintain power that long. And by then, the cascading failures will have destroyed other irreplaceable components. The ship is lost." Deacon pulled out what looked like a modified soldering iron, its handle showing components from at least 3 different species technologies somehow integrated together. Mind if I try something? Sarath's patterns flashed with colors that indicated disbelief bordering on insult. What could you possibly do with primitive tools that our advanced diagnostics and specialized equipment couldn't achieve? Probably nothing. But if the ship's dead anyway, I can't make it worse, right? Just give me a couple hours. This is a waste of time. Sarath. Admiral Vexter's voice came through her communicator. Let the human try, we have nothing to lose. She wanted to argue, but the Admiral was right. They had literally nothing to lose. 2 hours. Then I expect you to admit defeat like a rational being. Deacon just nodded and started unpacking his toolkit. 2 hours and 17 minutes later, the Radiant Sovereign's main power came online at 87% capacity. Every Kael'thari engineer in the fleet rushed to main engineering. They found Deacon sitting on the floor near the power distribution node, eating something from a ration pack, his toolkit spread around him in organized chaos. The power distribution node was not fixed, not in any conventional sense. The crystalline structure still had its fracture. Deacon hadn't even attempted to repair it, but he'd bypassed it entirely. Standard conduit ran from the primary power generators to a box about the size of a human head, some kind of converter that definitely wasn't Kael'thari technology. From there, power was routed through a series of junctions that used components Sarath couldn't even identify, eventually reconnecting to the ship's distribution network downstream of the damaged crystal. It was ugly, inelegant, a violation of every integrated design principle the Kael'thari held sacred. And it worked. What did you do? Sarath demanded, staring at the readings that showed power flowing through the improvised bypass at levels that should be impossible. Deacon swallowed his food and pointed at his datapad, which showed a schematic. Bypassed the damaged crystal, routed power through a secondary pathway using standard conduit and a voltage converter to handle the quantum-to-standard transition. It's not as efficient. You're getting about 87% of normal power output instead of the 99.7% the crystal provided, but it works. That's impossible. The power distribution system is an integrated whole. You can't just bypass critical components, the tolerances, the harmonics, the quantum coherence. Sure you can. Look. He pulled up his schematic on the main display, showing power flow paths he'd mapped through the ship systems. The original designers created redundant pathways for emergency situations. They're not meant to carry main power loads, but with the right modifications they can handle it. I just had to find them, calculate the load tolerances, and create interfaces between your quantum systems and standard power distribution. He pointed to the converter box. That's human tech, handles the transition between quantum and conventional power. Not as elegant as your crystal, but it's robust, and it doesn't care if there's a crack in the quantum structure. And these junctions, he indicated several points in his bypass, are rated for loads higher than what we're running through them. You'll want to monitor thermal output at junction 47, but it's well within safe operating ranges. Sarath pulled up her own diagnostic systems, not trusting the human's primitive datapad. The readings confirmed everything he'd said. The ship was running, not at design specifications, not with the elegant efficiency the crystals provided, but running. This is heretical, she said quietly. You've violated every principle of integrated design. You've introduced inefficiency. You've created a solution that exists in no manual, follows no standard protocol. But it works, Admiral Vexter said, his voice carrying something like awe. His patterns were glowing with colors Sarath recognized as profound relief. The flagship is operational. Our people can breathe air that isn't recycled through emergency systems. We have power for weapons, navigation, everything. It's not perfect, Sarath started. Perfect is the enemy of good enough, Deacon said, standing and stretching. Your ships were built for perfection. Mine was to get you operational. Now if you'll show me the next ship, I'd like to see what we're dealing with fleet-wide. Over the following days, Deacon moved through the fleet like a force of nature. Each ship had different failures: power distribution, environmental controls, weapons targeting, propulsion systems. But his approach was consistent. First, understand what the system was supposed to do. Second, find a way to make it do that even if the original method was broken. Third, implement fixes that worked even if they weren't elegant. He created bypasses around damaged components, rerouted systems through pathways never intended for that purpose, jury-rigged solutions that made the Kael'thari engineers cringe. On the Eternal Mercy, the environmental control system had cascaded into failure because a single regulator had burned out, a part that would take months to manufacture. Deacon replaced it with a human-made regulator designed for a completely different system, modified with components from a Thishan mining tool, and connected it using adapters he built on the spot. It worked. Not as precisely as the original. The temperature varied by 2 degrees instead of staying perfectly constant, but the crew could breathe, and that's what mattered. On the Radiant Sword, the weapon's targeting system had failed in ways that made it impossible to acquire targets. Deacon didn't fix the elegant automated system. He couldn't. Instead, he created a manual backup using optical targeting and basic computing. It was slower, less accurate, but it meant the ship could fight. "Why do you carry so many different components?" Sarath asked, watching him fix a navigation system using what appeared to be parts from at least 4 different species technologies. "Because things break in different ways. You can't predict what you'll need, so you carry variety and learn to adapt. But that's so inefficient. Why not just carry the correct replacement parts?" Deacon looked at her with those calm eyes. "Because correct replacement parts assume you know exactly what's going to break and exactly how it's going to break. In my experience, things break in ways nobody expected, so you need to be ready to improvise." "Improvise?" Sarath said the word like it was foreign. "That's not engineering, that's chaos. That's survival. Engineering is designing things to work. Survival is making things work when the design fails." The Kael'thari engineers started following Deacon around, at first with horror at his violations of proper methodology, but gradually with something like fascination. Because his ugly solutions worked. 7 ships came back online. Then 12. Then 20. Each one running on what Deacon called temporary fixes, but which proved remarkably stable when the Kael'thari engineers tested them. "How long will these repairs last?" Admiral Vexter asked during a progress briefing. "Depends on the specific repair. Some should be fine indefinitely as long as you monitor them properly. Others you'll want to replace with proper components when you get back to your shipyards. But they'll get you through whatever battles you need to fight in the meantime. You keep saying temporary and good enough. Kael'thari engineering is about achieving perfection. Perfection is great when you can achieve it," Deacon said. "But it's brittle. When perfect systems break, they tend to break catastrophically because there's no redundancy, no backup plan, no way to limp along with degraded performance. Your ships were designed to work perfectly or not at all." He pulled up a comparison on the display, a Kael'thari ship schematic next to a human ship schematic. "Human ships are designed to break. We assume things will fail, so we build in redundancy, backup systems, manual overrides, ways to reroute and bypass when primary systems fail. Our ships are less efficient than yours, use more power, have more mass, but they keep working when things go wrong. You're saying our engineering philosophy is flawed." Vexter's tone was curious rather than offended. "I'm saying it's optimized for different priorities. You designed for peak performance. We designed for reliability. Both are valid. But right now, your fleet needs reliability more than it needs peak performance." 3 weeks into the repair effort, 28 of the 32 ships were operational. The 4 remaining ships had suffered more severe damage, multiple cascading failures that had burned out components in ways that even Deacon's improvisation couldn't immediately fix. But he thought they were salvageable with time. Sarath requested a private meeting with him in the Radiant Sovereign's observation deck, a beautiful space with transparent hull plating that showed the stars and the slowly recovering fleet. "I need to understand your philosophy," she said without preamble, "how humans approach engineering, because what you're doing violates everything I was taught and yet it works. I need to know why." Deacon settled into a seat, human furniture that had been brought aboard for his use since Kael'thari seating wasn't designed for his physiology. "What were you taught about engineering?" "That systems should be designed for optimal performance, that every component should work in harmony with every other component, that efficiency is achieved through integration and elegance, that perfection is the goal, and that's good engineering. Your ships, when they work, are magnificent, more efficient than anything humans have built, but there's a cost to that perfection, which is fragility. Your systems are so optimized, so integrated that when something breaks, everything connected to it breaks too. It's like a chain where every link is connected to three other links. One link fails and the whole chain collapses." He pulled up a schematic on his datapad. "Human engineering assumes failure. We assume that every component will eventually break. So we design systems that can survive component failures. We build redundancy, backup systems that can take over when primary systems fail. We create isolation so that when one system fails, it doesn't cascade to others. We design for degraded operation, systems that can run at reduced capacity rather than failing completely." That sounds inefficient. It absolutely is. Human ships use 30% more power than yours for the same operations. We have more mass because of all the redundant components. We need larger crews to monitor all the backup systems. But we survive when things go wrong. Sarath stared at the schematic. "You're saying that efficiency and resilience are opposed to each other." "Not opposed, but there's a trade-off. Every time you integrate systems for efficiency, you couple their failure modes. Every time you optimize performance, you reduce tolerance for degraded operation. Kael'thari engineering chose maximum efficiency. Human engineering chose maximum resilience. Both are valid choices, but they lead to very different outcomes when things break. So you're saying we should abandon our design philosophy, build ships like humans?" "No, I'm saying you should understand the trade-offs you're making. Your ships are incredible when they work, but you need to plan for what happens when they don't work. Maybe that means building in more redundancy. Maybe that means designing systems that can be bypassed. Maybe that means training your engineers to improvise instead of just following manuals." Sarath was quiet for a long time, her patterns cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. "Will you teach me?" she finally asked. "Teach you what?" "How to think like a human engineer, how to improvise, how to create solutions that aren't in the manuals, how to make broken things work." Deacon studied her. "You sure it's going to feel wrong?" "Everything I do violates the principles you were taught. It's messy and inelegant and inefficient. But it works, and my ships are alive because of it. I need to understand this, not just watch you do it. Will you teach me?" "Yeah, I can do that." Over the following days, Sarath shadowed Deacon as he worked on the remaining damaged ships. He explained his thought process, showed her how he assessed problems, demonstrated his improvisation techniques. Other Kael'thari engineers joined them. Word spread through the fleet that the chief engineer was learning human methods, and curiosity overcame pride. Deacon taught them how to create bypasses, routing around damaged components instead of waiting for replacements. How to adapt components from other systems when the correct parts weren't available. How to diagnose failures by understanding what the system was supposed to do rather than just checking against specifications. Most importantly, he taught them to think creatively about solutions. "Your manuals tell you how to fix things when you have the right parts and the right tools in the right environment," he explained. "But real repairs happen when you don't have the right parts, or the right tools, or the right environment. You have to work with what you've got and figure out how to make it function." He showed them his toolkit, a seemingly random collection of components, tools, and adapters. Every piece in here has been used to fix something it wasn't designed to fix. This regulator was designed for life support, but I've used it in power systems, navigation systems, even weapons systems. This adapter was meant to connect human and Thishan components, but I've used it for Kael'thari systems too. This diagnostic tool was salvaged from a derelict and modified to work with 6 different species technologies. How do you know what will work? A young engineer asked. Experience and understanding fundamentals. If you understand what a component actually does, not just what it's designed to do, but what it physically does, you can often use it in ways the designer never intended. By the end of the 6th week, all 32 ships were operational. Not perfect, many running at 85–90% of design capacity instead of the 99% plus they'd been built for, but running, battle-ready, able to fight and defend and fulfill their mission. Admiral Vexter called a formal ceremony on the Radiant Sovereign's main hangar bay. The crew assembled, nearly 30,000 Kael'thari who owed their lives and their ships to one human mechanic. Deacon Grey, Vexter said, his patterns glowing with formal respect. You came to us when our finest engineers had admitted defeat. You took ships we had written off as beyond saving and brought them back to life. You've saved this fleet and by extension, saved the lives of everyone aboard. The Kael'thari Empire owes you a debt we cannot repay. He held out a rank insignia. I offer you the rank of Fleet Engineer, with full authority over all technical operations. I offer you a permanent position with this fleet. I offer you honor and recognition, and whatever compensation you deem appropriate. Deacon looked at the insignia, then at the assembled crew, then back at the Admiral. I appreciate the offer, sir, but I'm going to have to decline. Shocked patterns rippled through the assembled Kael'thari. You refuse. Vexter's patterns showed confusion. Why? Because I'm just a mechanic. I go where things are broken and I fix them. That's what I do. Right now, your ships are fixed. When they break again, call me and I'll come back. But I don't need rank or titles or permanent positions. I just need to know that when things break, people know they can call me. Deacon picked up his toolkit. I do have one request, though. Name it. I've prepared documentation. Every repair I made, every bypass I created, every improvisation. It's all documented with detailed instructions. I want your engineers to study it. Not to copy it exactly, but to understand the principles. Next time something breaks, maybe they'll be able to fix it themselves without waiting for a human to show up. You're giving us your knowledge freely. Knowledge doesn't diminish when shared, and your engineers are quick learners, Sarath especially. She's got good instincts for improvisation once she stopped being afraid of violating protocols. Sarath's patterns flashed with colors that might have been embarrassment or pleasure. Is there nothing we can give you? Vexter asked. You can promise me something. When you get back to your shipyards, when you're designing the next generation of ships, remember what happened here. Remember that perfect systems are brittle, build in some redundancy, design for repair. Create systems that can operate in degraded modes. Make your ships resilient, not just efficient. You want us to change our entire engineering philosophy. I want you to expand it. Keep the elegance and efficiency that makes Kael'thari engineering great, but add resilience. Add the ability to survive when things go wrong. Because things always go wrong eventually. The question is whether your systems can adapt when they do. 2 months after Deacon left, the 7th Battle Fleet received new orders. Engage the Krevnar swarm in the Taelis sector. The Krevnar were a hostile species that had been raiding Kael'thari colonies for years. The Empire had finally decided to end the threat permanently, and the 7th Fleet was being sent to destroy their primary staging base. Admiral Vexter studied the tactical display with concern. The battle would be brutal. The Krevnar fought with overwhelming numbers. Their ships were individually weak, but they attacked in massive swarms, like insects overwhelming larger prey. Fleet status, he asked. All 32 ships operational, Sarath reported. We're running at 87–94% of design capacity depending on the specific ship. Deacon's repairs are holding steady. We've monitored them constantly and made adjustments according to his documentation. Are we ready for combat? As ready as we can be, but Admiral, we haven't been tested in actual battle since the repairs. We don't know how these improvised systems will hold up under combat stress. Then we're about to find out. The battle began 3 days later. The Krevnar came at them with 200 ships, small, fast, heavily armed. They swarmed around the Kael'thari fleet like angry insects, overwhelming point defenses through sheer numbers. The Radiant Sovereign took a direct hit to the forward section. Alarms blared as systems reported damage. Main power distribution is hit, one of the engineering crew reported. The primary bypass, Deacon's bypass, is damaged. Route to secondary. Sarath commanded, her hands flying over controls as she implemented procedures Deacon had taught her. Secondary bypass established. Power at 73%. Acceptable. Maintain current operations. On the Eternal Mercy, weapons targeting went down under a barrage of Krevnar fire, switching to manual targeting. The weapons officer reported, using the backup system Deacon had installed. It was slower, less accurate, but the ship kept fighting. On the Radiant Sword, a critical hit severed main propulsion, routing through auxiliary systems. The engineer reported, implementing one of Deacon's improvised solutions. We have maneuvering capability at 60%. Not great, but we're not dead in space. All across the fleet, ships took damage that should have been catastrophic. Hits that would have taken them out of the fight before Deacon's work. But the crews remembered what he'd taught them. When main power failed, they rerouted to backup systems. When weapons targeting